Good day, dear viewers. We are pleased to welcome you to the broadcast of Expert Time. Today we will talk about the project and try to answer your questions.
Good day, dear investors, partners, and project participants. Good day to everyone. Now, straight to the architectural and urban planning solution. The project was submitted for review and approval on March 10th. On April 7th, we received a rejection for approval with comments. On the same day, the revised project from the 7th was submitted briefly. And from the 7th, a new report is underway. I understand the impatience of all project participants. I fully understand that many project participants have significant capabilities to influence the process. There is a suggestion to write to the Duma. Please do not make any rash moves. There is no need to do that. Under no circumstances. We are doing everything necessary to ensure that the project is realized. The architectural and urban planning solution is approved with changes, comments, and all their complexities. Yes, let them make comments. Let them do whatever they deem necessary. We will achieve our goal. The aim is to launch the project. First, its operation, generating profit, which is the purpose for which this project was created. The obstacles encountered along the way are inevitable. Yes, whether inspectors consider this a minor or significant fact is at their discretion. So let's work and achieve results. It should be clear and understandable that this is inevitable. It will be brought to a logical conclusion. And whatever is undertaken, whatever is done, there are comments. We observe and eliminate. Therefore, our task is to coordinate and approve the architectural and urban planning solution and accordingly submit it to Moscow Stroynazer to obtain a conclusion on the completion of construction. This is our main task that we must solve to move towards solving the primary task. There is no goal, it's just a task. The next point I would like to discuss. It seems that I didn't disclose the payback periods and timelines in the last webinar, which I am unaware of. I know, because if we are talking about us becoming participants and residents of Technopolis, Moscow, you see, this would have been impossible if we hadn't developed an economic model, a business plan, and an economic justification. All of this was in place. It's a large volume of documents, a large amount of information that was presented to the experts, and they found it all convincing. As a result, we are residents. But since that moment, since that time, indeed, a lot has happened and changed significantly over time. And all those metrics that were developed were more needed to assess how well we understood what we were undertaking. This is undeniable, because the experts are also good specialists and understand that over the course of the project's implementation, all these metrics will become outdated and new metrics for the project itself will need to be developed. And how feasible is it to do this now with the new development? I think it's not relevant that the relevance of calculating the project's payback period will come precisely after the project is launched and after the first batches of products are produced. I think we are already close to that moment. The process of setting up the equipment continues, and additional tooling has been ordered. We are currently expecting more additional equipment and various tooling from China, and we are further refining the necessary manufacturing technology for the product we will prioritize. And the priority are engines for the Modilek with more power and the angle grinder. Therefore, I have a request for those colleagues who have applied to be dealers. Please update your applications. You know where and how to submit it. Alexander Sidorev will probably reiterate it across all platforms and resources. Please update this information because the time is approaching. Let's say the packaging is already in the warehouse. Therefore, we are now expecting the arrival of specific specialists to perform the setup of some equipment from China. Well, and check off that the equipment is ready for operation, so that no questions arise later regarding its use.
The machines currently at DTB have electric motors. Will they be rewound to Slavyanka in the future?
When the warranty ends, yes, they can be changed. but not all of them, because some of the motors are not asynchronous, let's say.
What specifications are required for motor controllers? Maximum voltage, current, control method, over voltage and current protection, presence of PFC, frequency.
There are different controllers. We have a controller that will be specifically designed for the motors used in Modulek, but we also have, in particular, smaller controllers with a power of 20 kilowatts that we used on bicycles. These require technological development considering the available capabilities, along with some software improvements, because we have gained a lot of experience over time. And the technologies currently in use allow for significantly substantial changes in the design. Talking about voltages, for example, depends on the tasks being solved. In one case, a certain voltage is needed. In another case, a higher voltage might be possible. Everything depends on the tasks and what the particular vehicle will be used for. But the most important thing, the key aspect, is, of course, the algorithms and software that will be used in the controllers. Because it's no secret that vector control of modern engines and modern management is based on Parkharev transformations and other algorithms that allow assessing the rotor's position relative to the stator. These are fundamental values, the foundation of the software. From there, everything depends on the customer's requirements.
At one of the seminars, it was indeed mentioned that the DA95C could be made sensorless, as the controller will be sensorless. How will you determine the rotor's position at near zero speeds when you can't monitor the back EMF? This is important for traction drives.
But in this case, we're saying that our motors are currently sensorless. That's the first point. Secondly, remember what was discussed in the webinars. That regardless of the type of motor, whether it's BLDC, such as brushless DC motors, asynchronous like induction types, or reluctance models, all these various kinds of electric motors have poor performance characteristics at low speeds of relative movement between the rotor and stator. Therefore, again, it all depends on the application and purpose of these motors, because in one case it's one thing, in another case it's different. And for most applications, the motors are sensorless. If we are generally speaking about hub motors, we have already mentioned that it is more practical to make them with gearboxes, depending on the vehicle. The gearboxes can be planetary or belt-driven, with a wide variety of types.
In one of the photos of the motor for Modulek in a disassembled state, a comb for an optical encoder was noticed, similar to those on traction hub motors. Are the motors working with an encoder? The Chinese failed us with the controller, and we are waiting for the controllers. What does that mean? Let us down they didn't deliver? How will new controllers differ from current ones? What brand are the controllers?
First of all, the motors of the initial modifications worked with a Chinese controller, and it required an encoder. In what way did the Chinese let us down? They didn't let us down. The shipping company sent it by sea. And where is this container shipped now? Which oceans is it wandering through? Only God knows. After all, if we're talking about the stamp, it should have been delivered back in 2023, right? Exactly. That's why there are logistics issues. The Chinese send it. When will they arrive? God knows. But for the Modulek, we are planning to use our controllers now. Moreover, all the mechanical elements are currently being manufactured. These include the radiator, electrodes, various gaskets, and other components necessary for assembling the controller, including the casing. A plastic casing. We already have 50 casings in our warehouse, and now we are working on refining and testing the controller on the test bench. And after that, we will make a decision about starting the production of the boards and assembling the first batch of controllers.
Global trend. High voltage systems, less current loss, more engine efficiency. Low current battery is lighter. What is the maximum current on the Modulek engine? 400 amps. And what kind of losses are there in the wires? And how thick and heavy are those wires? And the battery has to handle those 400 amps, not 60 kilowatts, 600 amps.
It all depends on the design. I already mentioned that the first transformers in the power supply unit for Gornik were wound in full accordance with science. They were wound with Litz wire and copper tape. They weighed over 2 kilograms. Sophisticated, made scientifically. They heated up. It was pointless. We used printed circuit boards like these. How many grams do they weigh? 70 grams of copper, and everything is fine. There, the density is 0.2 amperes. There it's 0.4 amperes. But here we have 75 amperes, and nothing heated up. And we don't need those thick wires. If you remember physics, losses are proportional to resistance. Right. Not by the cross-section, not by the cross-section. Resistance. And what does resistance depend on? On the length and the cross-section. And if we reduce the length by 20 times, by how much can we reduce the cross-section? By 20 times. And why have thick masses to carry? It has come to the point where even these legs, the 220 package, their resistance already has an effect. That's why they make BJ-type outputs, soldered from below, where there are practically no legs, to eliminate this resistance from the circuits. So, if you're going the classic route, well, go ahead, then you're right. But if you think a little and gain experience, well, maybe everything will be a little different.
Is there a chance that this year we can establish the production of aircraft engines in the amount of 50 to 100 units per day? Or is that for the following years?
In chat number 1, I already showed a part of the aircraft engine bed. So what does it consist of? A stator pack, a sleeve for the bearing, and all of this is encased in aluminum. I mentioned that this part, as soon as we receive the tooling and fine-tune the machine, we will be able to make in 30 seconds. Then you can calculate how many such stators can be made. Similarly, the rotor will be cast in a high-pressure die casting machine with the same productivity. But since there is only one machine, all of this will need to be divided accordingly. We need to first cast one, then for the entire series, let's say, for a monthly program, for example, then remove it and introduce the second one. The most complex operation is probably the insertion of the windings, which is labor-intensive. Next, less labor-intensive, is the winding of the sections. And right now, we are looking for the opportunity to acquire 2 more CNC winders to increase the productivity of this particular technological operation. That's one thing. Secondly, to reduce the time spent on inserting the windings, we are currently in the process of experimenting with other winding schemes that allow us to reduce the number of sections from 96 to 48. We are looking at the labor intensity and, most importantly, the possibility of using mechanized equipment to make this technological operation more productive. Once we solve these tasks, what you mentioned won't be a problem.
Is a 125 millimeter.
We have been working on smaller-sized motors. They are suitable for a 125 angle grinder, as well as for meat grinders and other household appliances. But further work on them will only be carried out after the launch into production of the developments that have already been completed and brought to the production stage, well, practically to production, not before.
Am I correct in understanding that if we launch in 2025, dividends should be expected after a year, in 2026? And the second question, is there a possibility that the first dividends will go not to investors, but for reinvestment? Thank you.
In order to talk about dividends, they can only be paid by the shareholders of the company. Therefore, we first need to reorganize from an LLC to a JSC. And from the moment of the LLC reorganization, when it becomes a JSC, that's when you can start accruing profits and consider whether to distribute them. So that's the first part. The second part of your question is about reinvestment. As of today, the funds coming from investors allow us to avoid reinvestment, the likelihood of reinvestment, slightly. And reinvestment will only be possible if it allows for a significant increase in project profitability and can considerably impact the size of the dividends in order to ensure long-term growth and sustainability. That's definitely all. Thank you for your attention. Take care of yourselves and don't make rash decisions. A big request, if needed, we will reach out. And I would like to say that there are indeed quite a few project participants who not only invest but also very actively help the project. Therefore, I think that with the start of production, many investors and partners will have the opportunity to become direct participants and implementers of the project itself. Thanks, goodbye.